At 0402 local time, southeast of Krasnodar, a single Ukrainian drone crossed the last ridgeline before the Kuban plain and dropped into the dark. It had launched from near the Ukrainian border hours earlier, and a thin, ragged line of others trailed somewhere behind it in the dark. It was pointed at the Afipsky oil refinery, one of the plants that turns Russian crude into the diesel that moves Russian tanks. And it had just flown into a bubble of electronic noise thick enough that its own navigation had started lying to its face. Every GPS satellite it listened to was suddenly wrong. Not a little wrong, wrong on purpose. The position fix inside the lead drone jumped a mile east, then it slid north. Then it walked the drone's imaginary self out over the Krasnodar Reservoir, a wide sheet of open water the machine had never seen and was never supposed to fly over. The autopilot believed it. It nudged the nose toward the water, ready to fly a perfectly healthy aircraft into a lake, on the strength of a number that a Russian truck had invented 40 kilometers away. On most nights, that's the whole story. The drone goes for a swim. Nobody hears the splash. This one didn't turn. The nudge came, and the machine just didn't take it. Whatever was whispering those coordinates into its receiver hadn't worked out that it had stopped listening. Here's what was happening to it. Because you're watching one of the cheapest weapons in this war beat one of the most expensive tricks in it. This is GPS spoofing. A real satellite sits 20,000 kilometers up, and by the time its signal reaches the ground, it's about as loud as a candle seen from the next town over. A spoofer doesn't outsmart that. It outshouts it. It floods the air with fake satellite signals loud enough to bury the real ones, and a receiver built to trust the clearest voice in the room swallows the fake whole. Picture someone swapping every road sign in a city while you drive. Your engine's fine. Your steering's fine. Every turn you make is a lie. 40 kilometers back, a Russian electronic warfare operator watched a contact on his screen and waited for it to do something stupid. He'd done this 100 times. Put drones in the dirt without firing a shot, without a missile off the rail, without any noise at all. Just a lie whispered into a cheap receiver. His idea of a perfect intercept was one where nothing exploded. He marked the contact and leaned back to wait for it to wander into the reservoir. It was, by every rule he'd ever been taught, already dead. It wasn't. The lead drone had stopped trusting its GPS the moment the numbers stopped making sense. What the operator's screen would never show him was that the machine had been running two navigation systems side by side the entire flight, quietly comparing their stories, and the two had just started to disagree. So the computer chose. It threw the satellite fix in the bin, ignored the phantom pulling it toward the lake, dropped its nose toward the treetops, and went to check its work against the actual ground. That backup is inertial navigation. Spinning gyros and accelerometers that feel every turn, every gust, and tally it all up, asking the outside world for nothing. It's the oldest trick in flying. You're counting your own steps down a pitch-black hallway, sure of where the kitchen is because you memorized the house. Nobody can jam it. There's nothing to jam. Its one flaw is drift. Over hundreds of kilometers, tiny errors stack into real distance, and the machine slowly loses the thread of exactly where it is, which is why it had to come down low and start reading the ground with its eye. And that one move set up everything that came next. Down in the weeds, the navigation problem was solved clean. But down in the weeds, the engine drank harder. The fuel it had hoarded all the way from the border started to shrink, and every short-range gun around that refinery was waiting at exactly that altitude. A radar on the plant's outer ring caught a contact at 6 kilometers and locked. A missile screamed off a rail and climbed. It tore a drone 2 slots over from the lead into a slow cloud of fiberglass drifting down over a field. That shooter is a Pantsir S-1. Radar, missiles, and twin 30mm cannons bolted onto one truck. On paper, it eats drones for breakfast. 12 ready missiles. Cannons that throw 5,000 rounds a minute. Interceptors that reach out past 20 kilometers at better than 3 times the speed of sound. The most expensive drone swatter ever built. Right up until the rails run dry. And here's the part the spec sheet leaves out. Some of the systems that should have been guarding this refinery weren't there. Over the past 2 years, Russia has quietly hauled a chunk of its best air defense back toward Moscow and its border regions to guard cities and headquarters. Because the leadership got nervous about its own skyline. It's pulling the smoke detectors out of the kitchen to mount them over the couch, then acting shocked when dinner catches fire. A wall is only as thick as the brick still standing in it. A lot of this one was missing. Out on the perimeter, the Panzer commander stared at his scope and did math he didn't want to say out loud. More contacts crawling across it than he had missiles to throw. He could see the gap plain as a bill he couldn't pay. This is saturation warfare, and it's the whole reason cheap drones beat expensive defenses. A Panzer can really only track and shoot one thing well at a time, and it only carries so many missiles. Now salt the incoming wave with decoys, empty airframes that paint a radar scope exactly like the real thing, and the gunner can't tell the lethal one from the junk until it's too late. Every missile spent on a maybe is one that won't be there when the real one arrives. One bouncer, a dozen people rushing the door. He grabs a few. The rest walk in. And the drones he's grabbing cost about $200,000 each. His interceptors cost several times that. His launcher holds 12. Ukraine builds these things by the hundreds. He runs out of missiles a long time before Ukraine runs out of drones. Somewhere in Kyiv, an accountant is doing this same math and smiling. The lead drone, out front of the first wave, faced the worst call of its run. Being lead meant being seen first and shot at first. The worst seat in the house. The safe move was obvious. Slide back into the pack, let the others soak up the attention, live a little longer. But sliding back meant arriving late, and the whole reason this drone existed was to be early, before the smoke, before the cameras moved on. So it held its slot at the tip of the spear. What kept it alive up there wasn't armor or speed. It was arithmetic. The commander fired again. A drone burst over the rail yard. Then two more slid past the edge of his coverage untouched, droning on toward the refinery while he was still tracking the first. The rack emptied faster than the sky did. He dumped the last of his ready missiles into the wave, dropped the ones he could, and bought himself a reload gap. Those long, ugly seconds while the launcher hauls fresh missiles onto the rails and the sky goes wide open. The lead drone rode straight through that gap and came out the other side alive. One reason, it stayed first, and the swarm behind it ate the shots meant for everyone. Then it heard the guns. On the inner fence line, a boxy turret swiveled hard and ripped a stream of tracers into the sky. A low drone in the wave came apart in a shower of sparks barely a kilometer off the wire. That's a 30mm automated gun module, the kind of thing Russia only started bolting onto its defense lines recently. A radar and camera turret that fires programmable rounds, shells it tells to burst into a shrapnel cloud right next to a small target. No direct hit required, out to about a mile. A robot machine gun nest with a brain, triggered by a guy sitting somewhere safe. And here's what it really tells you. Russia is bolting robot guns onto its refineries because it already lost this fight one layer up, at the missiles. The Panzer a minute ago wasn't a strong defense failing. It was a thin one improvising. Somebody looked at the missile math, did the same subtraction the commander did, and decided a robot gun was better than nothing. The lead drone tested exactly how good better than nothing was, by never getting close enough to find out. It banked wide and slid clear of the gun's reach, and that one turn exposed the flaw. A module that only touches a mile of sky can't touch a drone smart enough to route around it. But going the long way wasn't free. Routing wide added distance. Staying low to stay hidden added drag. On a machine that had already flown hundreds of kilometers on the fuel in a hobby plane tank. Every extra mile it flew to dodge those guns came straight out of a reserve it had been guarding since the border. By the time it swung back toward the plant, it had committed to something it couldn't undo. One pass. No fuel to come around again. None to climb and loiter and wait for a cleaner shot. Whatever happened at that refinery happened on the first try or not at all. The guns didn't take the drone down. They took its do-over. And this deep into Russia, the do-over was the only thing that could have saved it. Then, from above and behind, a line of tracer walked across the sky and tore another drone out of the wave. Meet the Ka-52 Alligator, Russia's most advanced attack helicopter, and its answer when the ground defenses keep coming up short. Coaxial rotors, rated past 300 kilometers an hour, a 30mm cannon in the chin, and a price tag around $16 million an airframe. It was designed to kill NATO tanks on the open plains of Europe. Tonight it was hunting something with the wingspan of a hang glider and the price of a used car. A sharp crew can knock down several drones in one sortie with nothing but the cannon, and the helicopter is the one thing up there fast enough to run down a leaker that already slipped the fence. On paper, this is the drone's worst nightmare. In practice, the helicopter has an eye problem. It's hunting one small, cold, quiet airframe flying nap of the earth against broken forest, and it's doing it through a gun camera that glares wide under its own muzzle flash and freezes at the worst possible second. It's like spotting a single moth against a cluttered backyard through a fogged-up phone camera at noon. And every hour that $16 million helicopter spends chasing $200,000 drones, the accountant in Kyiv is still smiling. The lead drone faced the last clean choice of its flight, and like every choice before it, both doors were bad. Climb and a steady run would hand its camera a beautiful look at the refinery, while painting its silhouette against open sky for that cannon. Or drop into the ground clutter beneath the helicopter, where it would live, but where its camera would judder through a low, fast pass at the very edge of what its little brain could handle. It chose, the way it always had, to live. High up, the gunner caught one drone clean and watched it tumble. He swung his sight onto the next contact, the lead, and lost it. His screen glared wide and stuttered. His eyes ached from an hour of hunting small shapes against dark ground. He was good, and he refused to settle, and none of it helped. The one drone that actually mattered slid underneath him through the noise, and he never saw it go. By the time he blinked, his target was already dropping toward the refinery. The lead drone lined up on the plant. 2 minutes to impact. 120 seconds of fuel, altitude, and luck, its camera straining at the edge of its tolerance. And the target ahead was vanishing behind a thickening curtain of its own smoke, where an earlier drone in the wave had already cracked a tank open. Look at what was actually flying in. This is a Ukrainian long-range attack drone roughly the size of a hang glider, cobbled together from hobby plane parts for pennies next to a cruise missile. A wingspan near 7 meters, a piston engine you could almost buy in a shop, and a warhead in the nose about the weight of a grown man. It had flown hundreds of kilometers to get here, and for the final stretch, no operator, no radio link, no GPS, it was steering by one thing: a single camera in its nose. An eye that was rapidly running out of things it recognized. This is machine vision guidance, and it's why the spoofer never had a chance. The drone flies by eye, matching what its camera sees against satellite photos somebody loaded into its memory before takeoff, and drives itself the rest of the way in. There was nothing for the jammer to fool, because the drone had quit asking the satellites anything at all. It's a tourist who memorized a photo of the hotel before leaving. You can scramble every GPS signal in the city and he still walks to the front door, as long as he can recognize the door. Right now, the door was buried in smoke. The black column rolled across the camera's field of view, and the picture stopped matching the memory of neat silver tanks. The software hunted for a landmark it had been promised, and found a churning wall of fire instead. The lock broke for one heartbeat. The most advanced thing on that whole cheap machine had no idea where it was. 3 ways out, all shut. Climb above the smoke and hand itself to the guns. Orbit and wait on fuel it didn't have. Or find the target through the mess and commit. 2 doors nailed shut, 1 barely cracked. So the computer stopped hunting for the whole picture and hunted for hard edges instead. The rim of a single tank breaking the top of the smoke. The straight line of a pipe rack behind it. Anything solid enough to anchor on. It found a tank rim cutting the smoke line, and it locked. The range counter kept falling. On the fence line, one of those robot gun modules caught the drone through a gap in the smoke and opened up, walking 30mm rounds toward it from behind. Ahead, the smoke. Below, nothing but committed dive. 3 problems in a 3-second window. The camera held the tank rim, the nose dropped, and the warhead punched through the side wall of a fuel tank. Look at the weapon that went through that wall, because it's crude and it's mean. The warhead's steel case is scored on the inside, so when it detonates, the metal shatters into a dense storm of fragments instead of one ragged chunk. Against a thin tank wall full of fuel vapor, that fragment storm rips the steel open and lights the vapor in the same instant. The blast doesn't have to do the work. It just has to kick the door. The tank went up, heat rolled down the fence line hard enough to feel from a block away. Flame sheeted across the top, found the next tank, then the one past that. A fresh black column climbed over the Afipsky refinery beside the one already standing there. 2 pillars. Then a third across the plant where another drone in the wave had found its own tank. By the time it was over, the tally was written in the sky. 14 drones started the run. 9 went down across the whole gauntlet. The spoofer's lies, the Pantsir's missiles, the robot guns, the helicopter's cannon. 5 got through. And 5 was plenty. Multiple fuel tanks and a distillation unit burning. fires that firefighters would fight for the better part of a day, and a plant that turns crude into diesel knocked offline right in the middle of the summer. Now pull back and look at the whole thing, because the fuel tanks were never really the point. First, the refinery is a machine that feeds a bigger machine. Afipsky and the plants like it turn southern Russian crude into diesel, and that diesel is what moves the tanks, the trucks, and the artillery tractors of the exact offensive Russia was trying to push that summer. You don't have to destroy an army in the field if you can starve the fuel before it ever reaches the field. Second, this was an attack on the export ledger, not just the war effort. Russia's refineries and terminals earn the hard currency that pays for the whole war. Every plant that burns is a plant not selling, and the strikes have been landing often enough that Russia has had to lean on fuel imports and export limits to keep its own pumps wet. That's the kind of damage that doesn't show up as a crater. It shows up as a number on a spreadsheet in Moscow, in red. Third, and this is the part that should worry the Kremlin most, every layer of the defense worked and the defense still lost. The jammer put its lie into the receiver. The Pantsir killed. The robot guns killed. The helicopter killed. 9 out of 14 is an interception rate most air forces would be proud of. But an attacker who only needs a handful of leakers, and who aims them at fuel instead of armor, turns a beautiful kill rate into a burning refinery. Destruction is torching a fuel tank. Paralysis is torching the diesel, the export income, and the belief that anything 1,000 kilometers from the front is safe. That's the message left standing over Krasnodar in black smoke that no camera in that city could crop out. Russia can shoot down most of what Ukraine sends. It's the rest that keeps setting the refineries on fire. If this breakdown was worth your time, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you. And tell me below, if you were choosing Ukraine's next deep target, would you go after the refineries that fuel the war, the electronic warfare units that guard them, or the air defenses that keep getting pulled back to protect the wrong cities? See you in the next one.